In Formula One, there is always a new generation of drivers waiting to get their shot in the big league. That's what Oscar Piastri has been doing for the last couple of years. So, which race is he finally making his F1 debut at? Plus, why is Carlos Sainz being blamed for Leclerc's disappointing finish at the British Grand Prix? Stay tuned, because all of that and more is coming right up. First up, a star is born. At long last, one of Formula One's biggest future hopes is all set to participate in a Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri, a young Australian who has won both Formula 3 and Formula 2, has long been tipped to be promoted to F1 as soon as a seat opens up. The problem is, Piastri is part of the Alpine Academy, and at the moment, their drivers Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso aren't going anywhere. But things have been moving in the right direction this year. Team boss Otmar Schnavnauer has nothing but praise for Piastri and recognizes his strength. He said, "Oscar's a bright young talent coming through, as we all know, and he's been testing last year's car, and he's doing very well." There is talk that Piastri will be signing with Williams next year and following in the footsteps of drivers like Valtteri Bottas and George Russell by cutting their teeth with the bottom-ranked constructor. It's a great experience and the best way to see what he's really made of, and we will be getting a little taste of his skills in the next few races. Schaffnauer confirmed that Piastri would be participating in an upcoming practice session. Autosport reported that this will likely be at the French Grand Prix. Over the last couple of years, there has been growing pressure to find Piastri a seat in Formula One. Even Martin Brundle has said that he is the driver who most deserves a spot in next year's lineup. But as we all know, Formula One doesn't always go to those who deserve it. There is a lot of politics, money, and sometimes luck involved. Next, the veteran. Oscar Piastri's future looks like it largely depends on Fernando Alonso. The two-time world champion is 40 years old, but has already made clear that he is willing to keep driving for at least a couple more years. Some cracks in this relationship might be starting to emerge, though. So far this season, Fernando Alonso has been keeping up with his young teammate. At the British Grand Prix, he fought hard during a chaotic last few laps to take P5 behind the top teams. In the previous race in Canada, Alonso showed that he is still one of the fastest drivers on the grid. He put his Alpine in second place in wet conditions during qualifying, but couldn't convert it into a race result. But it was enough to silence any suggestions that he should move aside for younger talent like Oscar Piastri. Alonso looked to be working better than ever with his Alpine team. That was until the British Grand Prix. In the crucial final qualifying session on Friday, his team miscommunicated with him, which caused him to drain his battery. That meant that his final lap was not as quick as it could have been. Talking after the session, Alonso said, "It felt it was time to deliver again. Some risky laps, but we misunderstood each other on the radio, and I think it cost me maybe 4th or 5th. Alonso has a long history with the Alpine Renault team. He won his 2 world championships with the team in 2006 and 2007. Then in 2008, he rejoined the team with much less success. He was at the center of the Crashgate scandal with Nelson Piquet Jr. and left the team a year later. Later, he reunited with the rebranded Alpine team. But could it be time to break up again? Coming up, how did Carlos Sainz get in the way of Charles Leclerc at the British Grand Prix? And is Hamilton trying to reignite his rivalry with Verstappen? So don't go anywhere. Meanwhile, Fernando Alonso's countryman Carlos Sainz is enjoying the highest point of his career. At the British Grand Prix, he won his first Formula One race with an impressive drive for Ferrari, but he took advantage of some more misfortune for his teammate Charles Leclerc. At his 150th Grand Prix, Carlos Sainz finally became a race winner. It's been a long road from Toro Rosso to Renault to McLaren and now Ferrari to make that dream a reality. Sainz managed to overtake his teammate Leclerc in a wheel-to-wheel battle that almost ended in disaster. With Ferrari leading the race first and second, they decided to pit Sainz for soft tires and keep Leclerc out. This proved to be a big mistake, especially after a safety car bunched the pack up behind him. From the front of the pack, Leclerc fell to P4 after being passed by Sainz, Perez, and Hamilton late in the race. Once again, it was a strategic blunder from Ferrari for Leclerc, who could have profited from Max Verstappen's 7th place finish to close the gap at the top of the leaderboard. Instead of 25 points, Leclerc only gained 12 points in a season where Ferrari needs to take every opportunity that comes their way. After the Australian Grand Prix, he led the championship by more than 40 points, but since then Verstappen has been unstoppable. But after sustaining floor damage and a puncture, Max Verstappen was fighting just to stay in the points. In the final laps of the race, it was a rare sight to see a Red Bull battling wheel-to-wheel with Mick Schumacher's Haas. Ferrari will look back on this race as a lost opportunity to reduce Red Bull's lead. Still, he rises. While much of the focus has been on Carlos Sainz's first Grand Prix win, Silverstone was also a standout performance for Lewis Hamilton. Before Esteban Ocon triggered a safety car, Hamilton was in 3rd place and closing the gap to the 2 Ferraris up ahead. But it was his comments about Max Verstappen that have reignited last year's feud. After a difficult start to the season, Mercedes have started to turn things around. They seem to finally understand how to control their porpoising issues, and the results have been strong. Hamilton has had 2 podiums to equal George Russell's 3 this year, and at his home Grand Prix, Hamilton was in fine form. After a race restart following a safety car, had a lengthy battle with Charles Leclerc, and eventually came out on top. His Mercedes was not quite quick enough to take on the Red Bull, but his nail-biting fight with Leclerc reminded fans of championship-winning Hamilton. In his interview after the race, Hamilton said that he loved racing against Leclerc and he couldn't resist a comparison. He said, "Charles did a great job. What a great battle. He's a sensible driver, clearly a lot different to what I experienced last year." He was referring to his fight with Verstappen last year at Silverstone that ended up with the Dutchman hitting the barriers after making contact at Cope's corner. That crash was a turning point for last year's season, where a rivalry became more and more tense. It looked like the drivers had put it behind them, but with Mercedes getting back to a competitive level, it could be reignited. After the British Grand Prix, Mercedes team boss has been optimistic about the direction that the team are moving in. He said, "Without the safety car, Hamilton would probably have won the race. The most encouraging thing was that we had a car that was able to race. It was a dramatic improvement from just 2 races ago in Baku, where Hamilton was struggling to get out of his car at the end of the race due to severe porpoising, and their team have admitted that they would have been breaching the new aerodynamic oscillation metric that is being put in place for the safety of the drivers." The FIA has been forced to intervene after several complaints from drivers and concerns about their long-term health. Starting from the French Grand Prix, the FIA will be measuring the vertical forces of each car to make sure that it is not harmful to the drivers. Thankfully for Mercedes, though, they are now within the safe levels of oscillation as shown during the British Grand Prix. But Silverstone is known to be a relatively flat circuit compared to others, and so only time will tell if the Silver Arrows have really fixed their bouncing or not. One thing that surprised Mercedes from FIA's investigation was that Red Bull and Ferrari may have engineered more flexing into their floor that is able to give them an edge. Wolff said, "Nobody had an idea until the FIA brought it up in the last Technical Advisory Committee. A bit of a surprise, to say the least, more of a shocker. We will have to wait and see if the FIA take any action to combat the flexing or if it will be adopted by other teams." Do you think that Red Bull and Ferrari are breaching the new technical rules? And could this finally level the playing field? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.